24th. And let's see, I majored in political science, minored in philosophy. Um, right now, I'm an attorney in Columbus, Ohio, and I think that's it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Landau Goodman. I am a graduate of the college from 2011 and the design school in 2014. I also then went to law school, so I'm now an attorney, but I've been involved in the same civil rights work that I've been since undergrad. I was a urban studies and environmental science major, and I minored in anthropology, pronouns he and they. I'm from Philly, and I'm coming to you from Harrisburg today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time out to come here. I'm really excited to see so many people. My name is Cassandra Jobman. I'm a current senior at Penn, and I'm majoring in criminology with minors in urban studies and Africana studies. And I was born and raised in Nebraska and graduated high school in Texas. And nice to meet all of you.
Hi everyone, my name is Lewis Lynn. I use he and his pronouns. I just graduated in the class of 2020, where I studied political science and health and societies and minored in Asian American studies, education policy, and environmental studies. Then I submatriculated into the Masters of Public Health program, so I'm part-time there and working full-time.
Great. So Chris, your journey at Penn, the justice work that you are inspired to do, and insights that you have for students.
Most definitely. What I want to say is, first of all, I'm proud of all the students being on here at this particular preceptorial. You know, Valerie's a great mentor. She was a great mentor to me. The GIC is a great place to really sort of step outside of your comfort zone. And so, I encourage you to do more stuff with the GIC, but we'll get to that. I started Penn, I think 2010. And sort of just going into it, I mean, the landscape of Penn right now, from what I can tell, and speaking to some more recent alumni, is much different than what I came into in terms of movement work and all that kind of stuff. It was definitely less of a popular lane back when I started. Honestly, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I just expected to go to the East Coast and live out my college life and have fun and stuff like that. I mean, it's not a bad wish either, but certain experiences, while I did have fun, in college, certain experiences enabled me, and being in the GIC, and as Valerie said before, being on the United Minorities Council board enabled me to just sort of like meet all kinds of different kinds of people and be exposed to different ideas that I wasn't necessarily exposed to before. I had always sort of been into social justice work, ideas, literature, since I was probably middle school or high school. But I think there's a difference in terms of like learning, through books or teachers or whatever, about some of the stuff that like you really sort of experience it being in community with other people that share your same values. So I appreciated that. I stayed with UMC, I think, until I graduated. Also worked with the Student Labor Action Project. And I'm just glad that nowadays, because I think back when I was a sophomore, Occupy Wall Street was popping off, and that was a movement. But again, it's sort of like it wasn't like all encompassing throughout the campus. I remember when folks were protesting outside of Wharton, and that was a fun time. But it just seems like folks are a little bit more engaged now, and I appreciate that. Examples of the work I do. So I went to law school, graduated in 2017 from Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Well, I'll go put the V in front of it. And I immediately went into working in grassroots politics. So I worked for Justice Democrats in Brand New Congress when they were first starting out. That's the AOC, Cori Bush folks that started their campaigns. And so I was fortunate to be a part of that, but I also wasn't getting any legal experience that I wanted. So I decided to go back to Columbus, I became literally the opposite of what I was talking about, a corporate lawyer. Did that for a year and a half. Didn't really like that for reasons that might seem obvious and some that aren't. But I wanted to blend my need for wanting to get legal experience with, my values. So I became a consumer protection lawyer for a little bit. And that didn't work out either, just because of my boss. So, the theme is that sort of like topsy-turvy in terms of, what you can do or not do, what you choose to do after school. It's not a linear path necessarily. So now I'm at the Ohio Credit Union League. And so I am an advocate, a lobbyist for credit unions, and credit unions are financial cooperatives. And so they're owned by the people that make deposits there. And so, while I didn't really ever see myself being into credit unions. Seems like a pretty, niche thing to be interested in. I'm glad that I can at least advocate for cooperative, models and businesses and stuff like that. And so I've gotten a lot of joy from that. And also I got this job 2 weeks before, the plague started. So I was happy about that. And then, do you want me to talk about the virtual reality stuff, or you want me to pass it, Valerie?
Let's hold on to that, how you can pivot in a virtual reality, because that will probably be related to questions students have, and I want them to have time to chat, to actually engage in dialogue. So let's hold on to that. But I think really important to remember that credit unions, the whole notion of democratic financing is something we don't know how to do well in this country, and that's why so many of our communities are hurting.
Right.
So that's really important piece. So Jason, your turn to talk about your journey at Penn, how it evolved into this work that feels like your life's work right now.
Sure. Thanks, Chris, and then thank you, Val. My internet isn't so great right now. Can you all hear me and see me? Everything was perfect until a second ago. If you need to skip me until I figured this out, that's fine.
You want us to? We can move to Cassandra for now.
Oh, wait, now.
Are you good?
I think I'm good. So, okay, because now all of a sudden everything's working. So if it freezes again, I'll figure out another network. But
Wonderful.
Good to see everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Jason. I was born and raised right outside Philadelphia in Montgomery County, and came to Penn having come from a Quaker school with an interest in social justice work. Was just joining student groups and figuring that could look like. I got involved with a number of LGBT student groups, ultimately helped across the Commonwealth, and I continued on today as the executive director of the Pennsylvania Youth Congress. So Val wanted me to play a quick clip. I think I figured out, so I have my computer right here, and I'm gonna share my content, and I have the clip put up. So as many of you hopefully were familiar with before, he passed away last month, but John Lewis, former congressman and former chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which has been a very central inspiration for me as an organization, and certainly many of the leaders from Julian Bond and Diane Nash and John Lewis. So I hope this is an area of history that you'll really pick up, because it's part of our present today. When I was starting to form the organization, I, like a nerd, logged on to C-SPAN and got to ask John Lewis a question. So it's just a 1.5-minute clip, and hopefully I can share the screen. Share.
True.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Jason posts on our Facebook page, Congressman, thank you for helping design an effective youth movement. I am a student at the University of Pennsylvania who has helped form a youth-led statewide social justice organization directly based on SNCC. Often, young advocates are marginal.
That we're doing the right thing by learning about the civil rights movement and applying that to the work that we're doing today. So, involved with the coalition of the LGBT student groups on campus called the Land Alliance, and I was the vice chair of that organization. But I was noticing how other schools were similar issues were
It sounds like Jason has frozen as well. Welcome to our technological limitations. Perhaps what we can do while we're waiting for Jason is we can move to Cassandra and then come back to Jason.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I guess I can share a little bit just how I even got to Penn, but I came to Penn through Questbridge, so I was already kind of immediately involved within like the first-gen low-income community. I don't know if any of you guys had a chance to do Penn Cap this summer, but that was a big kind of start to my basis of being involved and really caring about, you know, how we could push Penn to do better for the communities on campus, especially those that are underrepresented within the university. And I started to find my community. I found GIC kind of the summer after my freshman year when I was a work-study student working with Penn libraries, but I also got involved in the interfaith community. So I was chair of PRISM, which is Programs for Religious, Interfaith, and Spiritual Matters, and have been really deeply involved with that throughout my time at Penn. So if you're interested in any interfaith work and how we can, like, I don't know, better come together and also create spaces for people who are, again, underrepresented. That's a great community to be a part of. And also as a criminology major interested in kind of thinking about abolition and reform, I've been involved with the PD Green program, which allows students to tutor in correctional facilities. And so that's been really eye-opening to get firsthand experience, and again, has kind of like propelled me wanting to work with people who are incarcerated after I graduate. And then more recently, I don't know if anybody attended the Penn Community for Justice preceptorial, but thinking about pilots and how we can, you know, push Penn to pay pilots, which are payments in lieu of taxes, and also thinking about, you know, how we can better serve the community that we've really taken so much from, and kind of thinking about Penn's how Penn has acted historically in the community. But yeah, I mean, I know it must be so crazy for you guys thinking about how you're going to build community online. I've heard from a few of you guys at another preceptorial I did, but there are so many spaces on campus and there's a lot of opportunity. So don't be discouraged. Like, everyone's available virtually. And I know the GIC will have like a lot of great programming. And I'm excited to see how you guys will make the most of this weird kind of first semester. But something I wanted to drop a quick something I was talking to Val about is there's a lot of money floating around at Penn, and there's a lot of grants you can apply for. So earlier back in April or May, I applied for a grant to make like my own coloring book based on different, like featuring different activists from Philly. And so I got approved for a $1,000 grant to like buy supplies and materials and really make it happen. So that's kind of a way I've been able to even virtually like stay engaged and do something fun. So if you need any suggestions on grants, like look at the Curve website, look at other like websites, see what's being offered, because there's so much opportunity and it doesn't stop just because we're online. Like, I'm excited for you guys. Freshman year, so much to offer. So yeah, I guess that's it, and I can pass it off to Lewis.
Yeah, so as Val kind of introduced, I am a part of the first and low income community. So I grew up in New York, and when I came to Penn, I was also a part of Penn Cap. And Penn Cap was kind of where I got my start of not knowing what a first and low income student was, and then realizing that's who I was and trying to fight to ensure that some of the resources that are at Penn are actually serving the students who may need it the most. So it's kind of an interesting path that I switched from, because I was a pre-med student interested in pediatric neurology, BBB major. And then it was taking classes within my poli-sci and health and societies classes that I realized that a lot of the issues that I was interested in terms of healthcare and health insurance stood beyond the medical field and started at more of the systemic level of institutional legal issues that basically have cut down all of the resources that other minoritized communities have been facing. And that's when I kind of pivoted my way and found myself in some of the justice work that I'm doing now. So I would say I like to break up my interests and like focuses into 3 categories of immigrants and education and health, but they're all interconnected. So that's mostly what I do now, especially at least at Penn, it was focused on education. I was part of Penn First, and that's how I first met Val and found Val to be a mentor of mine. We planned IVG, which is the largest first and low income student conference in the country. And if you are a Figley student and participated in any of the Figley NSO activities, I was part of the team of 4 that started that 4 years ago, and now has grown to something that we are actually able to bring students onto campus. But I tell people that the reason that you see a lot of leaders in these various spaces, and sometimes that when you're in a space that may or may not have been created for you, you kind of have to be more engaged to ensure that you are able to get those the historical issues that Penn has put down in terms of their allocation of resources needs to be basically uplifted or totally overhauled. And that was where the GIC came in for me, and helping me find my voice and finding how I was able to, I guess, translate my thoughts into action. And now I'm the student liaison for the student health section of the American Public Health Association, as we're facing issues with as K-12 education or even college education of returning to school in ways that students could equitably have access to internet, or if they are returning to school for whatever reason that their state has decided that they actually are getting the necessary protections and health benefits that more wealthy institutions and private schools may be able to get. So that's where a lot of my work has been focused now. I'm also the membership chair of Philadelphia Young Democrats, and that basically infusing into a political system like Philadelphia that is so ingrained in what could be considered a political machine, and infusing some of the youth and understanding of thoughts that the changing generation can have. But that's basically a long way to say that I came in not involved in any of this, but it's because of the work that I was able to find at the GIC, all the friends that I made through the Figley community, that I was able to find my voice and find a place where I could thrive and be with other people who felt the same way. So even as Val said, this is like a pre-professional school in some senses, but there are people who care deeply about the issues that you also care about. And maybe they're different issues and you can come together and work on them together. But know that those people are there, even if they are virtual for the semester.
Thank you, Louis. So Jason, if you why don't you complete your presentation, because I want students to hear how you moved from an undergraduate in Lambda Alliance to actually taking that brave step and going into rural Pennsylvania and beginning to think about the needs of LGBT youth, and then full circle to now the place that you're standing in, which folks need to hear about that space. I don't think even the panelists on the call know about it.
Sure. So again, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I should be fine now. So yes, I was noticing this void. We had young LGBTQ advocates on various college campuses, not only around Philly, but across the state, who would benefit from being connected. I didn't really have any formal political training or organizing training, but it seemed like it was an urgent thing to do because so many folks in our community, our most vulnerable, have been facing violence and discrimination, and just hearing the stories out there. I came from a very privileged background from the suburbs of Philadelphia, and learning about what's happening to my friends and trying to make sure that we started to really develop political power, because young people generally don't have that seat at the table. And so I would say this is happening also at the same time I was realizing what it looks like to have political power. I was also understanding, coming into myself in college, that we had no legalized civil rights for LGBT folks in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Today, we remain the only state in the Northeast where we don't have protections from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, in housing, employment, public accommodations. And so at 19, I went to my community in Montgomery County. I went to my local township board of commissioners and worked with them and started to build a community movement to get a local law passed. And we passed one unanimously 2 years later, which was the first in our county and the first township in the state to do so. You know, Philly, Pittsburgh had passed laws, but this was first of the real suburbs to pass one. So I saw what the power of organizing could look like. It takes just one or a few people really strategically organized and persistent, and you can actually pass laws. And so understanding the work that takes place both in getting laws passed, but also community building and community education, how all of those things put together really help save lives and make a more just and equitable society. So from this part of the work, focusing on LGBT rights and young LGBT people, my organization was also deeply inspired learning about SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which I was trying to explain earlier. And that was the larger student arm of the civil rights movement. And so learning about how young people help strengthen and complement the civil rights movement as a whole was very inspirational, and all sorts of movements. If you look at any successful social justice movement, young people have been at its heart. Young people are more adaptable, creative. There's so many reasons why, and certainly there's lots of challenges too. But there was not a space for young LGBTQ advocates to get together in Pennsylvania or really any state. And so we took sort of a big step. I was a senior at the time, and we formed an independent, youth-led, statewide LGBT advocacy organization. And that had never been done before in the country. And we just put ourselves out there and put our hands to the plow, and have been able to expand over the years, getting laws passed with local governments, getting policies enacted at the state level across the street from the state capitol here. And just being intentional about every relationship, every community that we work with. I've always been very informed by SNCC and leaders like John Lewis. I was a part of the Alliance for Understanding trip. And so that was my first time down in the South. And I kept going back, and I brought students within my organization down over the years, and especially to go to the archives and like hold letters from John Lewis and Dr. King, and understand the nitty gritty of just organizing. You know, there's a large part of our society which romanticizes the civil rights movement as something in the past that was just, you know, it happened because they were brave. It happened because regular working people fought for it and were organized. And there was so much work put into that organization. And so actually just today I had a question. I was like, I wonder what they called that in SNCC. And I went down to my filing cabinet where I have, you know, all sorts of information about that I photocopied from their archives. I think we have a lot to learn when we apply history and the successes of the past, and even the failures, because we learn from our failures, to help strengthen our own advocacy today, because the work is not done. It's the same march that in Selma as we are a part of today, and all the different work that's out there to make sure every human being is liberated and free, and there's equity and all of the things that we're fighting for. So I think Val just also wanted me to explain, another deep inspiration for me was Bayard Rustin. He was Dr. King's right-hand person. He was the organizer of the March in Washington, 1963, born to a Quaker family in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He never really got the credit that he was due because he was an out gay man, you know, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And that was an incredibly hard journey. And he is, again, an inspiration to so many. And so when we finally got our resources together to have this place in Harrisburg, I as soon as we, have our capital campaign, it will be dedicated as the Bayard Rustin House, the home for LGBT young people in Pennsylvania, right across from the Capitol. So I'll stop there. That's just a little bit of my story about learning, from the past, applying it to the present, and building something when no one thought we could, and still here. Yeah, thanks.
And I will also add to that context, for those who are not from Pennsylvania, the reason this is so awesome is because Harrisburg, where Jason is, where he plans to name the center the Bayard Rustin Center, it is right across from the state capitol. The significance of having the LGBT flag visible to a very conservative state legislator is not lost on us. The ability to actually, Jason has found Republican lawmakers for whom some of what he's talking about in terms of how vulnerable young people are, and the ability to help people supposedly on the other side of the aisle realize that we're talking about, this could be my kid, right? And the ability to bring people together. You all talked about developing political power. Cass, your examples of local movements to see that, to make sure Penn is being held accountable. Louis, the work that you are doing with democratic movements on our campus to support equity issues for LGBT rights. Chris, the work that you have begun to do with progressive social movement, political movements. You've reminded me the importance of developing political power, and contrary to what people tell us, the fact that youth have moved agendas, right? This is what they don't want us to understand, that youth have actually moved agendas. Every successful social movement has happened because there was a huge youth movement that was more energetic, more creative, ability to more versatile, and had tremendous ideas. So say a little bit about this role that you have started to play in your little worlds around political power. Why is that important to you? And you could just raise your hand, and then now that I've asked that question, the next I want to prepare students, I'm going to ask them to give you a chance to either ask your questions in the chat or turn on your video and raise a hand, and we'll bring you into the dialogue. But while we're waiting for you to do that, tell us why this is so important to you. You have a Penn degree. Chris, you became a corporate lawyer. You all have Penn, Cassandra and Louis, you will have Penn too, because Louis will have his second Penn degree. Cassandra will have her Penn degree in 2021. Jason, you are an attorney. You could go off and live your life. You will be fine. Why? Why not?
I guess I'll take a stab at it. One easy answer is that, that's so boring in terms of, using all the stuff that you've learned at a place like Penn, and, all the experience you had, and to not do something with that is just, I think the epitome of where we get at in this country. It's sort of like you can be selfish with that kind of stuff, or, and I'll tell just a little story about some of the political work too, or you can be selfless. So I'm still on the board of Brand New Congress, and a month ago, I guess it was a month ago, or a little more than a month ago, Cori Bush won her primary campaign in St. Louis. Cori Bush lost in 2018 by significant margin to the same person. She ran for Senate before that and she lost. This whole time she was working as a nurse. She had been homeless before. She really put herself out there to actually win this seat. That was completely unwinnable. I mean, in 2018, I went out to canvass with her, and we had people just shut their doors on us and stuff like that. I'm voting for Lacey Clay, blah blah blah. But she was so persistent and tenacious. And if for those that don't know the background of Corey before this, she was one of the preeminent Ferguson activists. That's exactly why we chose her as our first candidate. And so when you see stories like that, when you see AOC, when you see what folks are doing with the Sunrise Movement, talk about youth and talk about historical outsiders making waves and setting the narrative for and people are talking about the Green New Deal and Medicare for all like it's been in vogue, but it hasn't, and that's really the only way you sort of plant your flag and move the ball forward is to take chances. And so the reason I'm interested in that is because I'm tired of, people would say I'm tired of the same, even folks that you think aren't, because I hear conservatives and independents or whatever say it's all corrupt and never going to change. I hear their despair, but I also know that it's not the understanding of what it takes to make this change is lost on a lot of people. A lot of people know the symptoms because they feel those symptoms, but they don't really get what the problem is or how to address it. And that's not, an indictment on any person. It's just sort of the way that this system is set up to make you not really be engaged. And so, I feel a responsibility to, not just because of everything that I've, had the fortune of experiencing, as a Black man in America, I feel the need to be engaged, but I also just feel like I'm tired of these reruns. That's the post that I was talking about. I'm tired of seeing all of this stuff happen again like it's a cycle and not be broken. And so, that's why I think it's important to just, let's start at the base, start at the grassroots, let's start with the youth. And that's why I still stay in it. So.
Jason.
Sure. So the question was about why power is important. Power is vital because power is change. It's, and not talking about the power of an individual or the ego-based power, but I'm interested in building the power of our communities, servant-based leadership, group-centered leadership. Communities that are strong don't need necessarily individual strong leaders. That's an Ella Baker philosophy. We can build the power with each other to create the sustainable long-term change towards beloved communities. I know that was a lot, but just to break that down, we're going up against extraordinary forces. My organization, many young people organizations don't have a lot of money, but we have people and people have power. We have our stories, we have our organizing ability, we have the vote, we have the ability to change public perception, and we have to use all of those tools. Val called me an attorney. I guess I technically am. I did pass the bar. And that carries some weight. But when I walk into rooms, it's about my community relationships and my experience working in rural school districts with them and helping their families and working together in community, working on projects where, we're centering those who are vulnerable, those who are affected. We're doing that work together. And, in some spaces, political spaces, I don't have power. I don't have the large, PACs and the money. And that came across in a meeting last week. But I don't pay that any attention because I know where the power lies, and that's with the people. And when you have a coordinated effort with a group of people, you have the power to change things. And as long as you don't give up and you're persistent and insistent, you can accomplish anything. And I've learned that's true for everything I've done over the past 10 years since I started as an undergrad in this work. Optimism about all of this, about the power to be built, about the change to effect, that's a political decision for me. And I'm really proud of the work that I've been able to be a part of and that I've seen so many of my peers been able to do. You build it within the infrastructure that exists, or you build a new table and you build new infrastructure. And that's what I did as an undergrad. I didn't see a space and we couldn't get a seat at the table. So we built our own table. We built our own power. We coordinated with more people than they ever expected us to. The last thing I'll say is, just again, young people, there's an idea that, we'll form a committee or a group and we'll sit down after a few months. But when you're insistent and persistent and you see that the change is here and you're just part of making sure it is willed into reality, when you know that the change is coming and you keep working toward it, it will happen. So.
So Cassandra and Lewis, you're at Penn right now. Some of the things Chris and Jason have talked about, they've had some years to accomplish. You're at Penn right now. What can an incoming student, what can they begin to do? What did you begin to do? Cassandra, you talked about discovering that not only could you do this project, this coloring book project, which you now want to put in all the public school libraries, and we can help you do that because another resource that Penn has is Penn has a community outreach program in the libraries, so we can task them to actually put this in libraries across the city. But you also mentioned how you managed to get Penn to give you credit for this. So both you and Lewis, maybe Cassandra first, like, I'm a first incoming student. How do I actually even begin to take these steps?
That's a really good question, Val. Yeah, I mean, as an incoming student, you have so much ahead of you. I'm feeling like the end is near as a senior, and I'm just like counting down. Not even like it just is it comes and goes so quick. I think like if there's something you're passionate about, like don't waste time. Like if you know what you care about and what you want to get involved with, like dive head first, and people will be excited that you're there and like will help walk you through it. There's so many mentors on campus. Like I'm just thinking back and reflecting a lot, and I'm just thinking about all of the connections I have and people who are willing to support me in whatever project I want to do. But with the course credit, something I literally just found out was independent studies. So that's where you can get a course credit for just doing basically a passion project or research project that you care about. And so I told, I'm part of like the Kelly Writers House kind of. So I told my pre-major advisor, like, hey, I'm making this coloring book. And she was like, oh, since you're doing it anyways, why don't you apply to make it an independent study? I'll oversee it and you can get credit while you're doing it. So that's just a little thing. Like the application was so easy, y'all. It was one paragraph. It got approved in like 5 minutes. Got emailed back. It's like, looks good. So if there's like a passion project, and it'll kind of create that space for you to do what you care about, because it's so easy to get caught up in just Penn and like internships and all of this stuff. But if you take it back and just take a step and just sit back and be like, what do I care about? And like, I'm really excited that I'm going to be able to leave Penn making something really tangible that may seem small, but I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be important in big ways, to be able to talk to people and to highlight people who maybe aren't well known from the community. So yeah, like just tune out all of the pre-professional noise that can get to you. Like do the low paid internship that's people facing if you want. I mean, also do finance if you want. It's none of my business, but yeah, just like enjoy it and make the most, and don't forget to actually care about people and think about the space that you're in and the land that you're on.
So there's a question for us. For Raneen, has it ever felt difficult to speak out at Penn about issues on campus? Was there fear of backlash? How did you overcome that, and what support did you receive? Think about.
Valerie, you're muted. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Think about it this way: they're arriving at Penn. They're maybe meeting people. In this point, you might have met them in your RA groups. They are meeting them virtually, right? Not everybody might share where they're coming from, whatever. So is it difficult to speak out? Do you worry about backlash, and where do you find support to do what you're doing? Lewis, do you want to start with it?
Yeah, I can 100% say that I have felt like there are times where it's difficult, but it's the fact that I have people like Val. 'Cause Val is like my point one person of I'm going to run by my ideas with you. I'm going to talk through them. And you tell me which administrators are going to be the most friendly to me about these things, the people that will have my back and are willing to listen to what I want to say. And then you go to them first, and then you kind of take it out and be a little bit more loud, the people that may not want to listen to you. But the other side of it is having the student support and interest of, if you're within a community and there are issues that you have talked about, maybe even offhand, and know that there is an interest or a strong urge for students to be engaged in these issues, then leverage that. So I think a few things I'll talk about, or the one is when the Asian American Studies department, we lost our faculty director to Yale, and then we were lost. We still don't have a faculty director for our program. So the reason that ended up happening is, whether it be pay or whatever issues it may be, then we held a protest or a rally outside of College Hall. And that was something that we knew that we were not going to necessarily have administrative support for. We still haven't. I was the co-chair of it and talking with the dean, and like, it's hammering these issues and not giving up on them, even if they like pass you off to somebody else, or they say, yes, come on in for another meeting 6 months from now, but keep your issue on their mind and don't relent on it until you get what you want. So that's what I'll say with that point. I will also say that somewhere in your career, I know I would not have felt comfortable doing that as a first year incoming student, and that is okay for you not to feel that you do not need, if you care about an issue, you do not need to feel like, oh, I can't say it and therefore I'm not the right person to be in this place. Go for it. I know that it was until senior year that I was in a meeting with the provost and just asked him why have 3 of our Asian American administrators left and not been replaced, and now our vice provost for university life is an Asian American person. And not that that's the reason that it happened, but like willing to ask these high level administrators and having them face issues, because maybe they don't know about it, and I don't know whether they don't know, but maybe they don't, and you're the person that can put it up in their mind, and just being somebody to pop it in their head.
So I will say from my own perch that it did matter. The choice of an Asian American for this position, all things being equal, having heard the voice of students, it was a reminder that this is a population that doesn't get noticed, that's underrepresented within student affairs and so on this campus. So it did matter. Anybody else want to respond to this question about whether you should speak up, and has it been difficult? What is it like being at Penn and being politically active?
I would just want to jump in quickly, second everything that was just said by Louis. Leadership on college campuses and often in the world can be also an isolating experience. So I thought it would just be good to point out that sometimes you're going to feel like you're out on a limb, putting yourself out there, putting your stories out there, being with others, but you're not alone, not by a long shot. You know, specifically for the work that I do, I thought there was only like 1 or 2 people, you know, who were young people caring about LGBT civil rights work. But you get those 1 or 2 people together from the different committees, from the different schools across the state, or, you know, even connecting on conferences nationally, and you can build those networks and create change. Sometimes, I mean, there were a lot of highly visible events that I was a part of at Penn that were really successful, and some that it was like, you know, drawing teeth, you know, trying to get doing a get out the vote rally in 2010 was really hard in front of the library, but we had people come and senators, and it was a nice affair. But I don't know, I think the one more thing I'll say for backlash, it wasn't backlash, but it was non-prioritization, I guess, by the administration on an issue. I spent my time, after we got the direct no from the top, spent my, you know, past part of my life in the work in the world. And then I came back to Penn earlier this year to ask them the same question, and it was an immediate yes. So sometimes it takes time, but you know, don't give up, and just keep working at it. And you know, the feelings of being alone, the feelings like this won't ever happen, will diminish because you are winning.
So Cassandra said, tune out the noise. Chris and I had an earlier conversation where we talked about even after you leave Penn, but this probably is occurring to some of the students on the call. Maybe it's not noise, but maybe it is, politics is a hobby. Getting involved politically is a hobby. Or don't rock the boat. You're there at Penn to get a degree. Chris, can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, most definitely. So I definitely experienced that. Rocking the boat, definitely, at Penn. Like I said before, to Jason's point, like it's a different environment, I think, than, almost a decade ago. So, I mean, I remember, Trayvon Martin protests. I remember, like I talked about Occupy Wall Street. I think the folks at Ward were chanting, get a job to, the people outside. I remember when an Asian American woman got accosted on Locust Walk, and it was all just sort of fun and games, and nobody really felt like that she should have been protected, and it wasn't like vitriolic, like I did AU too, the marching across Selma and everything, but it was just people just did not care. And honestly, if you cared too hard, if you cared too much, it's almost like you were a weirdo. And so I get that, but to Valerie's point, that does continue. When I was getting my job with Brand New Congress, and didn't get paid that much, just trying to figure out what my prospects were. I didn't want to take the normal like law school route. Didn't want to do on-campus interviews, go to a big firm, even though sometimes you end up there. It was all like, Chris, like, why don't you consider something else? Why don't you do this, that, and this? And, out of my professional life, my short professional life, that position has probably been the most impactful in hindsight. And so you can't be afraid to take a chance and just, tune out that noise that we're talking about. I mean, there is good advice, and, you're going to accept that good advice. You're also going to accept bad advice, and you're going to not accept good advice, but the point is, it's like, it's your choice. It's your life to do with that as you please. And honestly, when you take those chances, that's what separates you from others, but also like when you can really step into like, what you want to do. And so I just encourage you to keep on doing that while you're in school. Do that after you're out of school. Don't stop, because you lose a little bit of who you are every time you let the noise drown you out. So.
Wow. You lose a little bit of who you are every time you let the noise drive you. We understand that everybody has practical concerns. I came up from a family where you put your head down and you did what was practical because you had to support family members, and we all have priorities, but I think this little nugget of advice about the more you walk away from what really moves you. You want to get up in the morning. The things that you think about when you wake up in the morning, and the things that you think about when you go back to bed at night. Those are the things that your soul is telling you should find some way to keep in your life. Cassandra, we're at closing, but I wondered if you can speak a little bit about the communities that you found support in. You worked with the interfaith community, your own church community, the importance of finding community in order to do this kind of work alongside your academics.
Yeah, sure. I'm getting so hyped hearing all of you guys, but yeah, I've been very involved, like I said, like in the Figley community, but also in like interfaith, and specifically finding community within the chaplain's office, which I think might be a great resource for some of you guys, especially when we're back on campus, having a, I don't know, really just an uplifting space, and having people that really care about you and are invested in you. But I've been really thankful, especially just for being able to get involved in communities beyond Penn. I think you'll need it a little bit for your sanity, because if you're only around college students nonstop for 4 years, I don't know, you need that family and you need that community vibe. So I've been going to a church in West Philly since my freshman year, and like have great people there who, like, I don't go home for breaks and they're like, oh, come to our Thanksgiving. And so that's just been really uplifting to have and stay grounded and to remember people and to be like, yeah, people focused and, you know, built by community.
Thank you. As we, before we close, do any of the panelists have any last tidbits you want to share? And then I actually want to turn it over to my two wonderful colleagues, Toys and Kia, to just offer a little bit of advice as they move into their semester at Penn. But before I do that, any of the panelists have a few nuggets that you want to leave folks with as they're beginning their journey at Penn?
I'll quickly just say that you feel free to throw out everything that you wrote on your application. If you take a class and you want to change what you want to do, that is perfectly okay. You are not held to, I'm not doing that. I know a lot of friends who aren't, but then there are also people, if you know that that's what you want to do for 20 years of your life, then go ahead and do it, but don't feel bound to that. And just simple advice for your.
I was talking to Valerie a little bit about this, but you know, given the unique situation of this year, I think that um, you're able to really take this education into your own hands. I know that, you know, there's pros and cons to this situation, you know, believe me, I feel for y'all, but you know, it's an opportunity to really sort of like, hey, like, you know, the structure has sort of been dissolved now. You know, you still get the benefits of education, but you can do what you want. So, you know, really lean into that, I would say.
Okay, Toys, do you want to close with some final words of advice?
My goodness, after all these wonderful folks have shared all this wisdom, I think that would be the takeaway, right? Like to look around you. Classmates and peers like Cassandra and Lewis, and there's others around you that you're going to meet. You know, get involved and talk to folks, right? Don't assume things about people sitting around you. You don't know who you're sitting around. You're sitting next to a Chris Noble. You're sitting next to a Jason Goodman, maybe not physically in proximity, but virtually, and get to know people. That's my takeaway. Good luck, everyone. Best wishes.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for so much advice. And have a wonderful start of the semester, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.